Hello, I'm Tom Long. About 12 years ago, this month, my stepdaughter prematurely gave birth to our first grandson. And I can still remember the look of anxious concern in my wife's eyes as we rushed to the hospital, worried about whether or not this baby was even going to make it. And then a year later, we celebrated his birthday, his first birthday, and we were all so excited that he was healthy and well, and people came from all over, even though the day of his birthday celebration, there was a blizzard in town. That didn't stop anybody. We all came out to celebrate. We were so relieved, so happy. And thinking about my grandson who turned 12 years old this month, I think is a great gateway into the story that we have in our gospel reading this week, as Jesus in this story happens to be 12 years old. And so I can kind of more easily visualize Jesus at the age of 12 as our grandson has kind of transformed from that baby cuteness into a handsome young man. So let's enjoy God's creation together today. Let's go for a little walk and reflect on the events surrounding Jesus' family and Jesus at the age of 12. The story starts: every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Jesus didn't get lost. Jesus stayed behind. He made a choice and took an action. That's the first time Luke reports anything like that happening. Then the story continues by telling us what his parents were doing. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among the relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. The festival of the Passover was a big deal. Yet there are only two times that Luke talks about the Passover. The first time is here, at the beginning of Jesus' story, and the last time is just before Jesus completes the purpose for which he came. Most likely everyone in their village had proceeded to and returned from the festival in Jerusalem together. It's a scenario that's probably a challenge for us to imagine. Parents discussing issues and gossip with one another as they walk along, groups of kids running this way and that way, playing with one another. But at the end of the day, they realized that Jesus hadn't been off playing with the other kids. In fact, he was nowhere to be found. We're told some of what Mary said when she did find Jesus. I don't know if it's all of what she said, because if it was anything like what my mother would have said in that scenario, Luke might have edited that part out. But seriously, this is what Mary said. "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." And that word translated anxiously in the NIV is used sparingly in the New Testament. Luke only used it in two other places. For example, when the Apostle Paul was leaving the Ephesian church to continue his missionary work, Luke wrote in Acts, what grieved them most was his statement that they would never see his face again. And the word translated grieved is the same word as we had for Mary's being anxious in our story. But in Luke 16:24, we're told that the rich man in Hades asked Abraham in heaven, "Father Abraham, have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." And here, the word is translated agony, that was translated about Mary's being anxious. My point is, Mary wasn't just saying, "Gee, son, I was a little upset. You want to go get some ice cream?" I think of the look in my wife's eyes when her grandson was born prematurely and struggling to survive. Mary was that kind of anxious. I think of the time when I got lost at about 5 years old, and when someone brought me back to our house, I found my mother standing by the washing machine, crying, sobbing, overwhelmed with concern. What could have been so important that Jesus would have stayed in Jerusalem? Let's go back to what was going on with him. After 3 days, the Bible tells us, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. So they finally find him, not after hours, but after days of searching. And where is he? Jesus is in the temple, listening to the teachers' lectures and asking them questions. And the teachers hadn't chased him off. He's only 12, but they hadn't chased him off because his questions were probing and his answers showed amazing understanding. He was a prodigy in the area of biblical scholarship. The teachers and those listening in were amazed. His parents were astonished. It's the kind of reaction that will happen again when Jesus raises Jairus' daughter from the dead, or when the pair of travelers on the road to Emmaus hear the women's report of the angels at the empty tomb. If you hadn't already figured it out from all of the events leading up to the birth of the Messiah, we're beginning to see that Luke is not unfolding just any old story about the goings-on in the Holy Land. So what reason did Jesus give to his anxious mother? The NIV translates it this way. "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know? I had to be in my Father's house." The original Greek that's translated here is even less specific. The words literally say, "in the undefined plural somethings of my Father," as opposed to "in my Father's house." Some translations assume he is referring to his Father's business, or his Father's concerns, or his Father's affairs. You can fill in his Father's whatever in here. Most translations go with house. What do you think Jesus was referring to? It's interesting that Jesus said he had to be in his Father's house. At 12 years old, he already had a deep sense of purpose, of calling. We're not told much of how that understanding unfolded in the life of young Jesus, but here we see an early hint of that understanding. I don't know how you celebrated Christmas. Maybe you were alone. Maybe you traveled to be with friends or family. Maybe your village came to your house and it was mayhem. But like Jesus' parents at the end of the festival of the Passover, now might be a good time for us to leave the chaos or the anxiety of the holiday behind and go back and look for where Jesus can be found. Let's seek him together. After all, Jesus is the one who promised, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened." Don't be anxious. If you look, you will find Jesus. Thank you for joining me on this island meditation. I look forward to seeing you next week, or should I say, I'll see you next year.